And next, as Yaakov said, our panel will tackle science policy, which guides research, funding, and priorities across organizations. Our speakers are Professor Peretz Lavi of the National Council for Civilian R&D, Professor David Harel from the Israeli Academy of Science and Humanities, Dr. Naomi Beck of the Council for Higher Education, Professor Avi Dom, Chief Scientist at the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, and Professor I hope I'm pronouncing it well, Professor Shahrukh Hashmi, Director of Research at Abu Dhabi Department of Health and from the Mayo Clinic, joining us from Dubai. Please welcome them.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will start right away with the panel members. We have a very distinguished panel members, and we'll start with Naomi Beck. Ladies first. What is your opinion? What is your opinion on science policy?
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this conference. I think instead of saying what my opinion on science policy is, with your permission, I will just describe what we are doing at the organization that I currently work for with respect to advancing biomedical research. So I work for the Planning and Budgeting Committee of the Council for Higher Education, which is basically the regulatory and the budgeting organization of all higher education institutions in Israel, and regulatory of also private higher education institutions. And I am Deputy Director General for Strategy and International Affairs. And one of the things that we're doing is we operate through flagship projects that last any time between 4 and 6 years, because we have the privilege as the Planning and Budgeting Committee of Higher Education to operate with budgets that are guaranteed for 6 years, so that there will be stability for the system, so that we can organize growth engines, etc. And one of the flagship initiatives for the current multi-year plan, which we have started this year and will run up to 2028, is called MAVRI. The acronym stands for Advanced Biomedical Research that is Human-Oriented. And what we do there is essentially two things. On the one hand, there is a grant scheme, a very generous and big in terms of budget, and also in terms of the breadth, the width of the topics that are covered, that aims specifically the field of biomedical research. On the other hand, we have different initiatives to promote human capital in the field. And this goes from the level of medical doctors who are not MD PhDs but would like to pursue a career, in research, and they can do a postdoc here in Israel rather than go abroad, through generous grants for physicians that are already employed in hospitals and in HMOs to pursue research, all the way to joint appointments by universities and hospitals of physician researchers or clinician scientists. And in this way, we hope that in the coming 5 years, we will be able to really promote substantially basic science in Israel. And Israel, as you all know, has very big potential of advancing the life sciences. And maybe one last word about budget. It's close to 500 million shekels for the next 5 years, and we're funding it together with 2 philanthropic foundations. So I think that should be enough for now.
Thank you very much. And now we move to Professor David Harel. He will present the Israeli Academy of Science and Humanities.
Yes, thank you, Avi. I was actually planning to do something similar to what Naomi did and tell you about what the institution that I head, which is the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities, is doing for science policy, especially things that have to do with health. But I cannot let this panel get by without saying something about the situation in science policy and the government dealing with it during these days. So we have a finance minister, Sar Otzar, who has stated that theory of evolution is a farce and that he's definitely willing to cut 50% off the budgets for higher education. We have an education minister who for the last year has done everything in his power and several things outside of his power to have a hostile takeover of the National Library of Israel, Council for Higher Education, which Nomi is associated with, Yad Vashem, and most recently, the absolutely unbelievable attack on the Israel Prize body. And I cannot sit here without saying that one of the roles of the Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities is to advise the government and the governmental offices and other branches of the decision-making bodies of Israel on anything that has to do with science and science policy. And my advice to them is to stop all that stuff. I mean, I cannot sit here as the head of an independent mamlachti institution. The role I'm filling, which is president of the academy, the election is by the academy members, but the official appointment is by the president, and we don't sit under any minister or any ministerial office. And my advice to the government, if it stays the same government, is all this stuff has to stop. In terms of the Israel Prize, which is a very recent issue that has come up, I've voiced my very, very strong opinion. This has been in my head for several years, that the whole organization and decisions of the Israel Prize should be taken out of the hands of the Ministry of Education and any other branch of government which is headed by a politician, and should be given for a joint administration by Bet HaNassi, the president of Israel, and the Israel Academy. We will deal with the science prizes. The president's office will deal with the art, literature, music, sports, and the Life Achievement Awards. These are two bodies who do not sit under any financial threat or governmental office that heads them. And so this would be my most stringent advice to the government on science and science policy. Put a great emphasis on money and support of science, basic science, applied science. And actually, when I say the word science in Hebrew, Mada includes humanities and social sciences. Madai HaRuach u'Madai HaTeva, and our academy encompasses all of those. And I know we have a war. Money has to be spent on defense. It has to be spent on technology. If you throw out science and humanities, there is no country left worth living in. So that would be my main thing. If anyone wants to ask what the academy does, we have time, I'll say.
Thank you very much, David. And now we will move to Professor Hashmi. He is a director of research at Abu Dhabi Department of Health and a professor for medicine at the Mayo Clinic, United States. Professor Hashmi.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope you can hear me clearly. If yes, then I will continue. The science policy over the past few centuries has changed dramatically. And it's changed for a good reason, because the investment in science and technology has always led to miracles that have put the nations at the top of the world. I mean, we know the history of the world. From BC, the countries that were most advanced were technologically advanced. Until this century, in the past 1,000 years, we saw the British building the ships and the French building the Eiffel Tower. And the Americans actually made sure that they actually advertised the Empire State Building in 1930s, which they started building. And then came the science parks and the science triangle and many different inventions after inventions that really took America at a forefront of scientific technology. Now, that comes with a lot of investment. That comes to investment from manufacturers, from people who actually donate money. And we heard actually very good news from the first panelist that there was a huge grants coming in from different companies which are given pro bono for research. And the public health perspective also played a big role in advancing countries. I think the science policy should be assimilated based on scientific expertise by scientists who've got a foresight and who know the history of the failures and successes of science, but also by the public. Because if there's a disconnection, if there's no connection between the public, what the public wants, and which could be consumers actually in business terminology, versus what the scientists want and what the physicians want, then it really causes a lot of chaos. And that chaos really causes a disjointed effort, which is never successful. So listening to the public, listening to the world actually, which way the world is going. This could be directly through the people's mouth or consumer mouth, or through the social media, artificial intelligence engines picking up exactly what the patient's needs are, or the public needs are, or the public problems are when it comes to health and diseases. And then also the scientific foresight of actually this should be the priority area. Now, I cannot emphasize more of the evolution of the science policy over times, from China to Europe and US and many other countries on Earth. The priorities have changed, unfortunately. There was a lot of priority in the past on public health and preventive medicine. London School of Hygiene was at the top. In America, NIH invested a lot of money in public health. And over time, the funding for individualized medicine increased to such an extent that right now, more than 3/4 of the research funding in the drug development from cancer perspective actually goes to personalized medicine or precision medicine or drug development for individual cancers rather than public health. What causes cancer? Very little research money goes in there. So setting up the priorities, this was just an example, is very important for the policymakers actually to think about and allocate amount for a very specific scientific priority when it comes to science policy. Thank you very much, and more to come on discussion and questions.
Thank you very much for your nice words. And now, Professor Peretz Lavie.
Thank you very much. I'm currently the chairman of the National Council for Research for Civilian Research and Development, which is an organ decided in 2002 by the Knesset, an independent organization that appointed by the president in order to allow independence. And the function of the MOLMOP, this is the nickname, is to consult the government regarding science policy. And what is science policy? Science policy is everything that deals with science, allocation of resources, allocation of manpower, prioritizing areas for support. And by the way, when we heard about the Minister of Education decision to just cancel the Israel Prizes as consultant to the government, immediately the MOLMOP approached the minister and asked for a meeting, because we naively thought that his decision was based on the idea that we should focus during this Independence Day on the war, putting everything aside. Very naively. He didn't respond. Then came the reason, and the reason was, of course, Eyal Waldman, who I had the pleasure as president of the Technion in 2016 to bestow on him an honorary doctorate for his achievements in 2016. So science policy is an intricate business. We suppose to consult the government, and I must admit that we did it, but in order to improve science policy, I think we have to educate politicians about science. As far as I know, there is only one university in the world that have a center for educating politicians in science, and this is Cambridge. And I believe that we should have a center like this in Israel. Politicians should have some kind of education in science in order to understand it, in order to understand priorities, and to make the right decision. So science policy is complex. It needs some kind of compromises between different sections. You need science policy at a national level, you need it at a university level. In fact, every organization that deals with research needs to decide about science policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I will say a few words on behalf of the chief scientists of the different ministries in Israel. We have a very specific role in science policy. Each ministry is responsible for a certain objective of the country. For example, the energy ministry, they are responsible for energy. So they have to devote all their efforts and budget for the next generation of energy, the renewable energy, and less carbon releasing energy. If we go to agriculture, they are responsible for our fruit and meat and whatever what we eat. Okay, and my ministry is responsible for science in general. So we devote our budget to applied research, okay, to make better or to contribute or to encourage academia to generate more technologies for our economy, and also to develop technologies that can help people and the public. And now I'll move to certain questions, and I will start with Professor Hashmi. How to improve science policy decisions?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. One of the ways is actually getting the many opinions by public. And actually, those should be efficient mechanisms of taking on information from what the public actually is thinking of, which directions, as I mentioned earlier on. And that's pretty important. We actually release a public announcement for suggestions for every policy that's made in the US actually for the medical sciences. And there's a finite time. But how to make that more effective is going to be the game. Secondly, listening to the international global leaders is critically important. We live in a very global world. The diaspora is everywhere. The scientist community are connected because everybody's reading each other's papers and trying to replicate, try to innovate. And the more international opinions we've got, for example, making a budget and then distributing the budget in different categories. For that, if you've got a scientist from, for example, Israel, then Brazil, India, UAE, Russia, US, Japan, Australia, is gonna help. It's gonna help more actually to understand the direction the global scientific community wants to take. Because at the end of the day, everything we do in medical sciences and healthcare sciences is gonna help the world. And that's the difference between us and some other disciplines that in healthcare, our paper is published in PubMed, and everybody from Congo to Indonesia can apply those medical advances into the healthcare of their patients and also people. So I think that's going to be an important part of of shaping the scientific policy. And it should not be in a very quick manner. It should have very good modeling, because the modeling is important, mathematical scientific modeling of actually the scientific policy, because there's a lot of overlap between so many different areas and so many different governmental agencies and the private agencies and NGOs for the same purpose, that one has to model it very out, that what are the top priorities for which the scientific budget is going to be released based on the policy that we have shaped. And lastly, the example for this is, for example, in U.S. we've got the Office of Naval Research, we've got the DARPA, NIH, NSF, and many other agencies. And a particular medical university actually is not looking for funding from only NIH. I mean, they are getting a lot of grants from DOE, from DOD, from DARPA, for similar kind of projects, which are mega projects, which intersect the environment and human health, environmental toxicology and cancers, fertility, endocrinology, and many other areas. So that's another area that we need to work on, not to hurry, take our sweet time, model it, vary out that what are the priorities, and obviously working together between different agencies is going to only help the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hashmi, and we got the sign to finish. So thank you very much, panel, and that's it. Thank you.